The faint light from the high-rise windows spilled into the spacious penthouse, where Lucas Hartman sat in silence at a polished oak table. Outside stretched the glittering cityscape of New York, a place filled with people chasing ambition, fame, or wealth. Just like the women who had come and gone in his life. Lucas, 35 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, possessed a fortune many would envy. Yet deep inside, he was a lonely man, worn down by betrayal, cold handshakes, and eyes that looked only at his bank account, never at his soul. The door opened. Mrs. Catherine Hartman, his mother, entered. Elegant as ever, but her steps were slow, frail. She sat across from her son, wearing the same familiar look of disappointment. "Lucas," she began, "do you really plan to let me grow old and die without holding my grandchild?" Lucas sighed. He had grown used to this question, asked over and over at every family dinner. "Mom, I told you, I haven't met the right person yet." "The right person? Do you know how many good women I've introduced to you? All smart, well-mannered, from respectable families, and you turned down every one of them." Lucas let out a dry chuckle. Images of those women flashed in his mind, the judgmental looks, the rehearsed smiles, and their unmistakable hunger for the empire he had built. "They don't care about me, Mom. They care about my money." Catherine hesitated, then her voice softened. "I just want to see you happy. And if love isn't possible, then at least a child, so I can leave this world in peace." Lucas lowered his head, his mind tangled in doubt. He wasn't against having a child. He was afraid of being controlled, of being used. In his world, everything had a price, even love. After dinner, Lucas retreated to his room. The city lights cast a solemn glow across his face. His mother's words echoed in his head. Would he really go through life without someone to carry his name? Would he always be alone in this empty home, where a child's laughter had never once been heard? He didn't know, but something inside him, something small, began to whisper. Maybe it was time, not for his mother, not for the Hartman legacy, but for himself, for the peace he had never known. So he decided to go on vacation to relieve stress. Puerto Rico welcomed Lucas Hartman with soft golden sunlight and sea breeze tinged with salt. The kind of air that made him feel like he had just escaped a glass box he didn't realize he was trapped in. He had arrived without notice. No secretary, no assistant, no mother, no work. Just himself, a compact suitcase, and a decision to momentarily walk away from the world he built. From the moment his plane touched down until he stepped into the luxurious beachfront resort, Lucas said nothing. When his phone lit up with endless notifications, he glanced at the screen, then shut it off. He didn't want to be pulled back. Throughout his first day, Lucas sat alone on the sand, watching the waves roll in. Children laughed in the distance. Couples held hands and strolled along the beach. People lived slowly. And for the first time in years, he felt a small sliver of calm. But the emptiness stayed, no matter how beautiful the sea. Then came the second morning. The ocean was calm. The sky was still. Lucas decided to rent a jet ski, something he hadn't dared do since a minor accident years ago. But today he wanted to feel alive, truly alive. At first, everything felt perfect. Cool wind, clear water, the speed slicing through the silence. But soon clouds gathered, the sky darkened, and the ocean turned violent. The wind howled, waves slammed against his jet ski. He tried to turn back, but the engine died without warning, leaving him stranded in open water. Before he could react, a massive wave crashed into him, tossing him into the sea. Salt water flooded his lungs. He struggled, fought, but the current dragged him down. In those final moments before darkness claimed him, one thought flickered. So this is it. Not far away, Sienna Morales was rowing her small wooden boat back to shore after a failed job interview at a local restaurant. She was the daughter of a fisherman, born of salt and sun. Her mother had passed years ago, and now her father was in the hospital, waiting for urgent heart surgery. Sienna had no money, no connections, no degrees, only resilience. As the storm clouds rolled in and boats fled toward land, she spotted something in the distance. A body drifting, a jet ski abandoned. Without hesitation, she jumped in. The man was heavy, the waves fierce. But Sienna had grown up in these waters. She knew how to fight. With trembling arms, she dragged the unconscious man toward a rocky outcrop. She laid him down in a crevice, sheltered from the storm, soaked and breathless. Rain whipped against her face, but she fought to light a fire, using the last of her old lighter and driftwood from her boat. The fire caught. She stayed close, watching, waiting. He didn't move. His skin was pale, lips cold, but his features, clean-shaven, sharp, told her he wasn't a local. She said nothing, just watched the flames flicker and hoped he would wake. Night fell. Then he stirred. Lucas's eyes opened to firelight, aching muscles and a pair of deep brown eyes watching him in silence. "Who are you?" he rasped. "You're alive," she replied, voice firm and low. "I pulled you in. No one else was going to." He blinked, tried to sit up. "Where are we?" A rock in the middle of the ocean, no hospital, no phone, and no one's coming through this storm. Silence. Lucas looked at her. Sun-kissed skin, soaked tangled hair, lips nearly blue from cold, but her eyes, calm, focused, held no fear. "Lucas," he said quietly. "Sienna," she replied, her gaze unwavering. And in that moment, amid the storm, the isolation, and their worlds so far apart, something passed between them, and Lucas, a man who believed everything came with a price, felt something he hadn't known in years. Genuine gratitude, not bought, not forced, just real. That night, as the storm raged on outside and the fire between them dwindled to a soft glow, Lucas couldn't sleep. Sienna had dozed off sitting up, her head resting against the rock wall, occasionally shivering from the damp cold. Lucas watched her in silence. In that quiet moment, every wall he usually kept up, every suspicion, every shield, seemed to melt away. He didn't see a stranger anymore. He saw a young woman, brave, resilient, and above all, real. Something about Sienna stirred something deep inside him. She wasn't like the women he'd known, the ones who painted smiles and hid motives. Sienna didn't want anything from him. No flattery, no fake charm. She had saved his life, then sat beside him as if it were the most natural thing to do. "Do you have a dream?" Lucas asked softly, his voice just loud enough to wake her. She opened her eyes, looked at him for a moment, and replied, "I used to dream of becoming a nurse, but dreams don't pay for my father's hospital bills." Lucas nodded, asking nothing more. But in his mind, a thought began to form. Bold, irrational, and yet, somehow, more honest than any blind date or matchmaking meeting he'd ever endured. He turned to her, eyes steady. "I need someone to have a child for me," he said slowly. Sienna blinked, unsure she heard correctly. "What?" "I want a child. No love, no marriage, just a baby. I'll pay you $50,000 if you agree to carry my child." The space between them turned dead quiet. The fire crackled faintly, and raindrops tapped on the rocks like a warning. Sienna sat up straight, locking eyes with him. "What kind of person do you think I am?" Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was sharp, like a blade aimed straight at his pride. "No," Lucas said quickly. "I don't think you're that kind of person. I need someone real, someone strong, someone like you. And you think I'd sell my body for money?" "It's not selling," he replied fast. "It's an agreement. You help me. I help you." Sienna stood. "Even with my father in the hospital, I'm not someone you can buy." Lucas fell silent. He knew he had offended her, but the idea stayed in his mind. He'd thought about having a child before, but every woman he had met terrified him. Sienna was different. She wanted nothing, and that made her the only person he could trust with something this real. They didn't speak again for the rest of the night. The next morning, the skies cleared. A small fishing boat spotted them while scanning the waters after the storm. They were rescued and brought back to the island. Lucas paid for Sienna's hotel near the port and offered to take her back to the city, but she declined. Her dignity, after all, was still intact. Hours later, sitting alone in her room, Sienna received a call from the hospital. Her father's condition had worsened. Emergency surgery was needed within 72 hours. The cost? Unimaginable. Her hands trembled. She cried, helpless. And then, she remembered Lucas's outrageous proposal. At the time, it felt insulting. But now, standing at the edge between life and death for her father, Sienna had no other path. She found Lucas, just as he was preparing to fly back to New York. "Your offer," she began hesitantly, eyes avoiding his. "Is it still open?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper, the kind that came from someone about to break, but too proud to show it. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, then quietly, he nodded. When Sienna nodded in agreement, an unspoken contract was born between two strangers. No love, no promises, just a cold, calculated arrangement. But neither of them knew that from this emotionless transaction, something real, something deeper, was already beginning to grow. Back in New York, everything unfolded exactly as agreed. No promises, no embraces, no tenderness. Just a transaction. Lucas chose a high-end, discreet hotel where no one knew who they were or why they were there. Sienna arrived on time, makeup-free, dressed in a simple gray dress, her expression colder than the December air outside. The room was softly lit with warm yellow light, but between them was a chill no lamp could melt. Lucas said little. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was $5,000, the first installment of the promised amount. Sienna didn't touch it. She simply nodded and walked toward the bed. The act was cold, clinical, almost surreal. Sienna lay still afterward, her body present but her mind drifting far. Toward her father, toward her future, toward the version of herself she was leaving behind. When it was over, Lucas got up, adjusted his shirt, and Sienna stayed still, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if staring into a distant void where her pride had just been left behind. The next morning, Sienna left the hotel, carrying the envelope and a hastily signed handwritten agreement. Lucas had arranged a small apartment in Queens, paid for 3 months in advance. He didn't ask if she needed anything else, and Sienna didn't thank him. She began working at a small diner near the train station. Manual labor, long hours, low pay, but enough to make her feel like she was still contributing something on her own. Every day after her shift, she returned to her modest room, her legs aching, hands dry from washing dishes and chemicals. Yet each time her phone buzzed with updates from the hospital saying her father's condition was stable, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I did the right thing." Lucas continued to transfer money into her account every Monday, prompt, cold, and without a word. Neither reached out. Lucas buried himself in meetings, investments, and the metallic rhythm of numbers. But somewhere in the quietest corner of his mind, Sienna, the girl who had saved his life and agreed to carry a child for her father's sake, never quite faded away. One late night, after attending a charity gala, Lucas returned to his apartment. He took off his coat, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stood by the window, staring at the city lit up like a maze. The lights couldn't warm him. The home felt too quiet, too big, and too empty. He picked up his phone, typed in her number, then put it down. He didn't know what to say. Was she okay? Was she tired? Did she regret it? The questions came and went, but he couldn't find a reason good enough to call. Sienna, across the city, was curled under a blanket, eating cheap instant noodles, her eyes on the calendar where she marked each day. She didn't know if she was pregnant yet. She didn't dare imagine the future. She only knew one thing. In Lucas's eyes, she wasn't a person. She was the surrogate, a moving part in a grand plan he had crafted for himself. And that feeling, day by day, night by night, slowly froze her heart. 6 weeks after her last encounter with Lucas, Sienna received the blood test results. She was pregnant. There was no surprise, no burst of joy. She simply stared at the cold numbers on the white paper, then gently placed her hand on her belly. Nothing to feel yet, but she knew a life had begun. Lucas was informed immediately. His response came through a brief message. "Got it, I'll arrange the doctor." No congratulations. No questions about how she felt. Just business as usual. A week later, Sienna went for an ultrasound and a full checkup at the private clinic Lucas had chosen. Everything seemed routine until the doctor's expression grew serious. He asked her to stay longer for additional scans. At the end of the appointment, he handed her a report and spoke calmly. "You have a large ovarian cyst on your left ovary. Pregnancy will likely accelerate its growth. If untreated, it could twist or rupture, and that would be life-threatening." Sienna froze. The world darkened for a moment. Lucas arrived at the clinic later that day. Upon hearing the diagnosis, his reaction was immediate and firm. "Terminate the pregnancy." His voice wasn't raised, but it was cold. "We can't risk your life. I'll take full responsibility. You'll still receive the full amount." Sienna sat still. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. Inside her was a storm. Confusion, anger, and above all, deep disappointment. She had once thought Lucas was emotionally distant, but now she saw it clearly. He didn't see the baby as a life. To him, it was still just part of a plan. And if the plan failed, he erased it. "No," Sienna said so softly that Lucas had to stop to hear her. "What did you say?" He turned, frowning. "I won't terminate the pregnancy." She stood. "This is my child. It may be biologically yours, but it's mine. Because I'm carrying it, feeling it grow every day. I'm keeping it." Lucas fell silent. He wasn't used to being told no. He wasn't used to losing control. But when he looked into Sienna's eyes, he saw a resolve that couldn't be argued with. "You could die," he said, for the first time, his voice unsteady. "And I could live," she replied. "I believe this baby is a gift from fate. Maybe I'm just a surrogate to you. But to me, this is a real child, and it deserves to be born." Lucas didn't say anything else. He simply nodded and left the clinic quietly. But that night he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Sienna, thin, pale, hand on her belly, calmly facing death, playing over and over in his mind. Something shifted, something small, fragile, but enough to crack the ice around his heart. The next day, Lucas showed up at Sienna's apartment. No warning. She opened the door, exhausted, eyes shadowed with fatigue. She thought he had come to convince her again, but he hadn't. Lucas carried a bag of warm food, some vitamins, and a small air purifier. He placed everything on her kitchen counter, then stood there awkward and unsure. "I didn't know what you liked to eat," he said, "but I figured you deserve some care." Sienna said nothing. She looked at him like he was someone unfamiliar. Lucas continued, "I'm not a good person. I don't know how to do this right, but I can't leave you alone. Not when you chose to keep this child, for reasons I've never dared to believe in." She didn't reply. But when he turned to leave, she said quietly, "Stay and eat with me?" For the first time, they sat across from each other as people. Not a contract, not a condition. Just a woman carrying a child, and a man finally learning how to care. The first time Lucas stayed, Sienna didn't say much. She placed a bowl of hot chicken soup on the table, invited him to sit, and quietly ate with him as if they had known each other for years. But between the spoonfuls and the gentle clinks of cutlery, something in the air shifted. It felt warmer, softer. Lucas sat across from her, his gaze no longer distant. He didn't glance at her belly. He looked into her eyes, slowly, attentively. For the first time, Sienna felt that his gaze carried no calculation, no tension, only concern. "Do you still want to be a nurse?" he asked, his voice no longer flat. Sienna nodded. "When I was little, I took care of my mom until she passed. Then my dad. I never had enough money to study, but the dream's still there." "Shreddy." Lucas didn't reply, but Sienna noticed his fingers tightening around the glass of water, as if he were holding back something unnamed. After dinner, he didn't leave right away. He picked up the dishes, washed them before she could say, "Don't bother." She stood there, quietly watching the same man who once left money on a table, now awkwardly rinsing dishes in her tiny kitchen. Every movement was clumsy, but sincere. When he finally left, he didn't say, "Take care" or "Stay healthy." He simply said, "If you're tired, call me." Just 4 words. But for the first time, there was softness in his voice. The kind that came from someone who truly cared. Sienna stood by the door long after it closed, her hand resting gently on her belly. She didn't know when it happened, but something inside had softened. And in Lucas's eyes that night, She saw not just the father of her child, but maybe, just maybe, someone who might stay. Winter crept into New York with freezing winds and a sky that stayed gray day after day. Sienna was nearly 3 months pregnant. Her belly had just begun to show, and her body was changing. More fatigue, dizzy spells, and a tenderness in her chest that made her tear up at the smallest things. But Lucas had been distant. Endless meetings, business trips, and obligatory social events kept him away. Sienna never complained. She understood. She didn't demand. Instead, she quietly prepared dinner, left a folded blanket by the couch, and wrote him soft little notes in delicate handwriting. "Don't forget to stay warm. Me and the baby are waiting." Then one night, Lucas came home with a colder expression than usual. He didn't greet her, just walked straight into his office. Sienna sensed something was wrong, but she didn't ask. She brought in a cup of hot tea, just like always, and set it gently on the desk. "The money in the safe is gone," Lucas said, eyes fixed on the screen. Sienna froze. She didn't understand. "Only you and I have the code. Do you have anything to say?" The words sliced through her like ice. She shook her head slowly, her voice breaking. "You think I stole it?" Lucas turned toward her, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with disappointment. "I don't think. I know the facts. The money is missing. No one else could have opened it. I didn't take it." Her voice trembled. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But she was breaking inside. Lucas stood, his voice rising. "You think I don't know? Your father's in the hospital. You're struggling. No steady job. You think I don't know why you agreed to carry my child?" Every word, every assumption, struck her like a hammer. Sienna lowered her head, silent tears falling, but her voice remained calm. "Yes, I did it for my father, but I have never taken what isn't mine." Lucas looked at her, torn between rage, suspicion, and something deeper he couldn't name. He finally snapped, "Get out, now!" Sienna didn't argue. She quietly went into the room, packed a small bag, a few clothes, some books, her prenatal vitamins. Before leaving, she paused by the door, her hand resting on her belly. "This child will grow without your money, without your house, but I hope it won't inherit your cold heart." She stepped out. The door clicked shut behind her, soft but echoing like thunder inside Lucas's chest. And he stood there, alone, in the middle of his large, silent apartment, surrounded by the absence of a woman who left with no defense, no tears, only pride, and the child he had wanted, but never cherished. Lucas stood frozen in the empty apartment, the same space that once echoed with soft laughter whenever Sienna clumsily spilled orange juice on the floor. Now only the ticking of the clock remained, pressing heavier with every second. And in that quietest moment, he began to realize he might have just lost the one thing he could never replace just because of a momentary anger. 3 days after Sienna left, Lucas still couldn't sleep. He lay in the darkness of the large apartment, the same place where Sienna used to quietly fold blankets, cook chicken soup, and leave him little handwritten notes by his desk. Now it all felt like a dream that had disappeared without a trace. That morning, his assistant, Caleb, handed him a report from their private security team. "We reviewed the footage again. There's something you need to see," Caleb said, his voice unusually heavy. In the video, the new housekeeper, the one who had only worked for a week, was seen sneaking into Lucas's office, opening a drawer, and copying down the safe code from his notebook. That same evening, she waited until Lucas left, opened the safe, took the cash, and slipped out the back door. There was no room for doubt, no more suspicion. Lucas froze. His hand clenched the report so tightly the paper nearly tore. Inside him, something collapsed. He had falsely accused her. He had driven the mother of his child out of his home, without a shred of evidence, without even letting her speak. Regret didn't come like a storm. It came slower, deeper. It crushed him without sound. Lucas left his office and stood for a long time in front of the room where Sienna used to sleep. The bed was still half made, with creases from the last night she was there. The faint scent of the herbal oil she liked still lingered. For the first time in his life, Lucas felt completely hollow. He called every connection he had, hired people to search for her, returned to the hospital where her father had once been treated, but Sienna had vanished. As if, with all her pain and dignity, she had erased herself from the world he lived in. Weeks passed. Every time he tried to text her, he would stop. He'd type and delete, again and again. He stared at his phone, praying it would light up, just once, with a message from her. But it never did. Then one afternoon in April, Caleb returned from lunch, knocking gently on Lucas's door, sounding unsure. "I might be mistaken, but I think I saw Sienna." Lucas looked up instantly. "Where?" "Brooklyn, a small restaurant near the train station. She's waiting tables. Her belly looks pretty far along." Lucas stood without saying a word. Less than an hour later, he was standing outside the restaurant. The front window was fogged from the warm air inside. Through the glass, he saw Sienna walking slowly, balancing a tray of glasses. She wore a plain apron, her hair tied back, her face tired but calm. He pushed the door open. Sienna didn't notice him at first. But then, as if she sensed something, she looked up. Their eyes met. She froze. Lucas walked forward, heart pounding. He had never felt so small, so unsure, standing in front of anyone before. "Sienna," he whispered her name. His voice cracked under the weight of everything he hadn't said. She set the tray down. No greeting, no step back, just silence, watching. "I didn't come to explain," Lucas began. "I came to apologize." Sienna said nothing, but her hand rested protectively on her belly, like an invisible shield. "It wasn't you who took the money," Lucas continued. "It was the new housekeeper. We have the footage. I should have trusted you, but I didn't." He lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I don't need your apology," Sienna said slowly, her voice hoarse but steady. "I needed your respect. I was there. I trusted you. I gave you everything I had, and you chose to doubt me." Lucas took a step closer, eyes glassy. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life if you don't give me a chance to make it right." Sienna turned away. 1 second, 2. Then she let out a quiet, bitter laugh, the kind that hurt more than any cry. "You think an apology is enough? You think after everything, I'll just come back because you feel bad?" Lucas didn't respond. He knew she was right. "I'm not the woman you once knew," Sienna continued. "I'm a mother. I live for this child now, and I won't let anyone hurt it, not even its father." Lucas moved closer, his voice softer than ever, trembling with real vulnerability. "I'm not asking you to come back because I feel guilty. I'm asking because I miss you, because I finally see that you're the only person who never wanted anything from me, except kindness." Sienna's shoulders trembled, not from cold, but because part of her heart still wanted to believe him. Lucas looked into her eyes unguarded for the first time. "If I could, I wouldn't ask you to return as the woman carrying my child," he said. "I'd ask you to come back as the woman I love." Sienna turned to him slowly. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She breathed out a long, silent sigh, as if letting go of everything she'd held in for months. "You say you love someone you didn't even believe?" she asked. "I love the woman I was too blind, too stupid to keep," Lucas replied, sincere. "But if you let me, I'll be here every day proving that love, to you and to our child." Silence stretched between them. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like possibility, fragile but real. Sienna placed her hand gently over her belly. She didn't nod. She didn't agree. But her eyes had softened. Sienna agreed to come back, not because of grand words, but because Lucas had changed. Not in what he said, but in the quiet ways he showed up. He stopped trying to control. He listened. He cared. And more than anything, he stayed. Every morning, every evening, every moment she needed him. A few weeks later, Sienna went into labor earlier than expected. Lucas rushed to the hospital, pale with panic. For over 8 hours, he sat outside the delivery room, gripping the hands of every doctor who came out. When the sound of a baby's cry finally echoed through the hall, he nearly collapsed. Not from exhaustion, but from overwhelming relief. They named their son Chris. Short, simple, just like their journey. unpolished but honest and strong. When Sienna lay in bed holding their newborn, hair messy, face pale but eyes glowing with joy, Lucas entered the room and gently took her hand. "I used to think I didn't need a family," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "But you and Chris, you've shown me there's nothing in this world more precious." Then he pulled a small, plain ring from his pocket and knelt beside the hospital bed. "Will you marry me? Not for a contract this time, but for love?" Sienna smiled, her eyes glistening as she squeezed his hand. "We've carried pain long enough," she said softly, tears catching in her lashes. "Let's live for love, not survival." 3 months later, they held a second wedding in Puerto Rico, the place where fate began with a storm. There was no fancy gown, no grand ballroom, just warm sand, a golden sunset, Chris's laughter in the sea breeze, and two people who once lost each other finally found their way home. No more distance, no more contracts, just a family, a real one. On their first night after the wedding, Lucas sat on the balcony, holding Chris in his arms as Sienna rested her head on his shoulder. The sea breeze was gentle, the moonlight casting a soft glow over their tired but radiant faces. "I used to think I'd always be just a part of your contract," Sienna whispered. "But in the end, love won." Lucas smiled and kissed her forehead. "I never believed in anything lasting, but you, and our son, taught me that sometimes the most important things don't come from planning, but from what we dare to hold on to, even if it starts as a fragile hope." They weren't perfect. They had doubted, hurt, and lost each other, but that's what made their love real. Because love doesn't come easily. It's built slowly, from trust, forgiveness, and the choice to never let go, no matter what.